don't like using the word justice, because justice would mean George Floyd would still be alive. But it's accountability. That officer took a man's life in cold, calculated manner, and the whole world saw it. Now, it took 330 days for this man to actually be sentenced, and the family of George Floyd will finally have some peace. The same day this sentence happened, there was footage coming out of America of a young teenage black girl being shot 4 times by the police and killed in the street. Does her life not matter? Last week, a young 13-year-old boy, Adam Toledo, was shot dead with his hands above his head in the middle of a trial. Dante Wright, a young 20-year-old man, was also shot and murdered by a police officer as he pulled him over. To look at this guilty verdict as a victory would be wrong, sadly. The fight must go on, and we must keep taking to the streets and fighting for justice. An oppressive, racist system built on white supremacy will never be able to give us justice. The UK is not innocent. There are countless families in the UK still fighting for justice. Yusuf Maki and Shukri Abdi right here in Manchester. Mohammed Hassan's family are still fighting for justice. Benny Majinga's family are still fighting for justice. Kevin Clark's family are still fighting for justice. Christopher Capassa's family are still fighting for justice. Christopher Older's family are still fighting for justice. And so many more. Mark Duggan's family are still fighting for justice. The 72 lives taken in Grenfell are still fighting for justice. They want complete families wiped out in that fire. They don't want justice. They want accountability. Now, I don't want to use the word justice because the criminal justice system in the UK just can't deliver that to these families. They won't get their loved ones back. But the very least they can get is peace of mind, knowing that someone has been held accountable for the death of their family member. Now, we have to keep taking to the streets and being organised in the fight to end racism and any form of oppression. The death of George Floyd has changed the world as we know it, and it will never be the same, and it will never be forgotten, more importantly. Now, it's part of a movement, and it's our responsibility to keep applying pressure from all angles. Now, it's been a very difficult year, and the past few weeks we've been up against it, but I'm proud to be part of the Hulme Stand Up to Racism group and come and take the knee here every Wednesday with a bunch of like-minded people. Let's keep taking to the streets, let's keep up the discussions, let's keep this in people's faces, and one step at a time, we'll start to dismantle these systems that have oppressed us all for hundreds of years. Change is coming, power to the people, no justice, no peace.
I've never really said anything because it's a really emotional thing coming here every week. It's not something that feels like a fad where you put it on your Instagram or your Facebook. Like, it's something, when we take the knee for that time, it's something that's serious, and it really kind of makes me feel terrible. And I feel embarrassed that we have to say Black Lives Matter. Every time I hear Black Lives Matter, I feel like, why do we have to say this? And I understand we have to say this because of the whole institution. There are people who need to hear Black Lives Matter because they don't believe that. Every time we say it, it gives me a knot in my stomach, but that's why we're here, and we have to keep saying it, and so.
Do you know, when I heard the verdict last night, it did really make me feel great. This is a relief. I am so glad that was the verdict. I think it's the right verdict. Coming here, like you guys have been here every week for months and months since George Floyd was murdered, and he was murdered, and that's now legal, and it said he was murdered, he was killed. We know that. I mean, here, we've made some history. We make history. The justice system, we talk about justice. We ain't going to get justice because this system isn't for us, it's against us. We know that, we talk about that week in, week out here in Hulme. However, what we are doing is making history. We are pushing and demanding for change to happen. So I think you're right, we have to keep up the push, we have to keep up the fight, because this justice system, like the rest of the system, the stuff that creates it has to be taken down in order for us to get true justice, and a justice that we create and we know is in our benefit. So it is really, I felt really heartened when I heard that verdict. However, we have still got so much further to go. We have to keep up the fight, and we're still going to be coming out because, as you said, you named those people, that these deaths are going to continue, the austerity will continue, the scapegoating is going to continue. It's going to get worse. I'm sorry to say, I don't want to bring a downer. It is going to get worse. But what we should do is we should realise and take strength and confidence from the fact that globally, uniting together, fighting this system will work, and we have to keep sight of that, and we have to keep up the fight. Thank you.
Well done to everybody that's out here tonight, because we are part of the thousands of people across the country, hundreds of thousands actually across the world, that have built this global Black Lives Matter movement. Absolutely well done to everybody. And the fact that we're still going is fantastic. And let us be clear about this. That verdict was not about the courts. It was not about, oh, the system worked. Actually, the system didn't work, because if the system worked, George Floyd would be here today. That verdict was about the fact that finally people in America, the people who think actually that they run the world, saw the anger on the streets and knew they had to do something. That's why he went to court. That's why he was prosecuted. Let's be very clear. The worst that was really going to happen to him was that he would have lost his job. But we shifted that. We forced them to prosecute. And it is historic, because actually never before has a police officer been found guilty of murdering someone in the US. This is the first time someone's been found guilty. And for all they say about we're prosecuting, it's one bad apple. 300 people have lost their lives at the hands of the police in America only this year. And while this court case has been going on, people have been losing their lives at the hands of the police, black people. This is what happens. And I think it's very important for us to always remember that while we stand in solidarity with our sisters and brothers in America fighting on the front line, we have our own front line here. Lamin talked about the deaths here in Britain. I've got a very good friend called Dana Alder. Her brother Christopher Alder was killed at the hands of the police. She has been fighting for years for justice. She's never had it. And actually, while she was fighting for justice, she was actually spied on by the police. She was followed by the police. They made her out to be a problem. Not so far away from here, I've got another friend called Carol Duggan. Carol Duggan has been fighting for justice for her nephew, Mark Duggan, who was shot on the streets of London after coming out of a taxi that had made a hard stop because it was surrounded by police cars. 13 police officers, armed police officers, surrounded him. He was unarmed, and they shot him dead. And the court said, actually, it's okay because those armed police officers, 13 armed police officers, were right to do what they did. It wasn't excessive force, because actually they were scared. They had a right to feel scared because a black man was stood in front of them. What does that say? What message does that send out? Because I tell you what, there were black families around this country that must have been terrified after that verdict, because they meant that actually every black man is a target, an acceptable target to the police. And that's what we've got to fight. This is our problem here as well. It's not just America. I named 2 people I know personally whose campaigns I've been involved in, whose families I know. But actually there's many others that never get mentioned, who are fighting, constantly fighting. And I think when they saw what happened yesterday, they must have celebrated, and good, because that's what we should do. This is a victory, but it's our victory. It's not the system. It's not the authorities. This is a victory for us. Let's remember that this is our victory. It only happened because we took to the streets. And we need to continue out on the streets, because actually, let's be very honest, what does it mean here in Britain? This new bill that they are pushing through in Britain would have meant that these events that we've been doing every Wednesday, the Take the Knee, we could have been stopped from doing that. The police could have prosecuted us. The courts could have given us 10 years in prison for being a nuisance. There would never have been the justice under this new bill that's coming out that they're trying to push through. Another thing I want to say, this race report that's come out, apparently that Britain is a beacon for the rest of the world when it comes to racism, fighting racism, and being apparently an anti-racist society. I don't know what that world they live in, right? But I can tell you from experience, my experience of my black brothers and sisters, that is not the world that we live in today. That is not the Britain we know. But why do they want to use that? Because they want to change the narrative. They want to shift the story, because they've seen what we, as the Black Lives Matter movement, the anti-racist movement, has achieved over the last year. And they want to shift that narrative. They want to say, you know what? You've all just got a bit of a chip on your shoulder. Move on. Stop acting like victims. That's what they're saying. Well, actually, we're not victims. We're survivors, and we're fighters. And we're united, and we're going to push this racist system back. When we talk about building a movement, and that's what we have to do. We have to continue building the movement. So there are some organisational things involved. One of that building a movement is coming here every Wednesday, and I'm pretty sure we'll continue to do that. Yeah, absolutely, we'll be here every Wednesday.
Yeah.
When those officers thought it right to take away another black man's life, they didn't even care to think if he had a family, children, or a wife. You say you don't see colour, yet you play with my daughter's hair. You'll say, I didn't expect it to feel like that, as you mock her and continue to stare. She asked to play, you spat at her. Because her colour she won't hide. But when they call her a liar, in teachers, she's taught she can't confide. If her father drives a car that's much flashier than yours, you don't first assume he worked hard for it, you assume it's from an illegal cause. You say, if you don't like it here, go back to where you're from. My daughters were born in Cheshire and her cousins are in West Brom. You say that all lives matter. And yes, indeed, that's true. So why are you so angry when we say Black Lives Matter too? This isn't about making every white person pay for the horrific atrocities of yesterday. We're sharing the injustices and how the plight has been misunderstood. No matter what the media states, we're not out for your blood. You call me a lefty or a snowflake if I don't like what you say. Did you ever think how grating it is to hear this rubbish every day? When I want to shout or scream or call you a racist fool, my children remind me not to hate someone who wasn't taught the full history in school. Did you learn about the Windrush generation? Brought to the UK to help rebuild our nation. Within moments of the ships reaching their destination, they were repaid with racist hatred and downright degradation. Did they teach you about Sir Chauvin or his white British wife Ruth, and how they exiled him from what is now Botswana to stop him uncovering the truth? To those of you who don't understand why the Colston statue met with the fishes, please take the time to educate yourselves, and from me to you, best wishes.
Let's wave to them. They're watching, but the whole world is watching. I just want to report on some figures that I was able to uncover. It took a lot of campaigning to get them out of Greater Manchester Police, and that's some of the figures on disproportionality, and the three figures I'm going to call are this. When it comes to fines during the coronavirus period, black people are 47 times more likely to have been fined under the coronavirus laws by officers of Greater Manchester Police. Tasering. Greater Manchester has using tasers a lot, and the use of tasers has fallen, but not for black people. It continues to be 6 times as likely that you'll be tasered if you're black than if you're white. And when it comes to handcuffing, it's 4 times as likely to be handcuffed than white compatriots, white brothers and sisters. And those figures are clear from the Greater Manchester Police. That's the Greater Manchester Police. The former head of the Greater Manchester Police said that his force was institutionally racist. But the government recently, with their sewage report, or rather the sewer report, claimed that there is no longer any institutional racism anywhere in the country, except for the Labour Party when it was Jeremy Corbyn, which apparently was an institutionally racist organisation. What a load of, we know what we think of that. So they are an institutionally racist police force, just the same as the Metropolitan Police and all the other police forces, and to give them, the police, more power than they already have would be a very, very backward step. And if they decided, sitting in the car over there, that they didn't like what we were doing here, it would, in future, under the Police and Crime Evidence Bill, they would be allowed to categorise this as an illegal gathering. Not a civil offence, but a criminal offence. And that's why we say, you know, Black Lives Matter and defend the right to protest. And the two things are going hand in hand, and we will stand solid and we will continue to campaign. Let's all out on May Day, a week on Saturday, 4 o'clock in Peters Square. I'll be there, you'll be there, we'll be building it big, because Black Lives Matter and we're not going away!
I just want to really quickly make a point about what's happened in the Premier League. So, have you seen how quickly they were able to bring about change after 2 days? It was a 2-day long campaign, and that was a fight back against greed and rich, greedy men trying to make more money and taking the people's sport and profiting off it. So that's what happens when people actually get together and get organised, and protests clearly work. We saw it at Pimlico Academy when all the children refused to go back to lessons because the teacher banned colourful hijabs and afro hair. They sat on the school playground and refused to go back, and the rules were changed. The power of protest is so important, so that's why we're going to be here every week.
My name's Floyd.
policemen have been here taking the knee in Hulme ever since George Floyd was murdered. The first week we did that outside my house with some people who'd been doing the clap together for the NHS workers, and I just knocked on doors, having been horrified. And I know racism exists, and I know the police kill black people right across the world, not just in America. But to see it played out, and to see somebody saying so many times, "I can't breathe," and somebody having so little respect for that person that they kept their knee on their neck. We thought it was 8 minutes all these months, and it turns out to have been over 9 minutes. There's something really quite shocking about seeing what racism does to dehumanise sort of people, racists, to turn them into people who are not people, who can slowly suffocate somebody and not give a shit. And you could see that he didn't. And I think we were horrified by that, and that's why we did take the knee on that very first night when George Floyd was murdered. And we thought we wanted to do something more than that, so we've taken the knee every week, whether it was Christmas, New Year, snow, rain, wind, and we have had some shitty weather, although it's very nice tonight. And I think across the world people responded. I think there's a level of people saying enough is enough, that we're not putting up with this anymore. And the fact that we are overjoyed that a police officer has been found guilty of a murder that we witnessed, all of us, is something that, why are we so shocked and so overjoyed that somebody who killed somebody and was witnessed and filmed doing it has been found guilty? But it is the first time it's ever happened, despite the thousands and thousands of people that have been murdered, both in America and around the world, including here. And Lamin read out the list of some of the black people who've been killed in this country. And I think it's because of the protests that times have changed, and they don't think they can get away with letting coppers off doing that anymore. And that is something that I think we should take pride in, that we've been part of helping to make that happen. The people who came here week in, week, it might seem small, but actually we're part of a huge movement. And Lamin spoke about the football being about greed, and I think racism is about greed. Slavery was about greed, where people bought and sold people for money in order to make more money and made a living. Britain was made great on the back of buying and selling black people. They live on that legacy today. The Tories are made great by trying to divide black and white people against each other, by trying to divide north and south, and that's because they want to do greed as well. They want to somehow make money. They said that the COVID vaccine was sort of solved because of greed and capitalism, when it wasn't about greed and capitalism, it was about 98% state funding. But they will still make money out of it, because when we die, and when black people die in even bigger numbers, I work in the health service, and we see black colleagues time and time again are the people who are in ICU departments and are the people who have died. I think that greed continues, and the protests here are not just against racism, although they are against racism, but they're against the greed of a society that constantly puts making money over people's rights. And we're here to say that's not the sort of society we want. I'm a socialist because I want a better society. We're a rich world. No one needs to be poor, no one needs to starve, no one needs to go with a house, and divisions is how they get away with enforcing that system. And we hear a statement to say we will not go along with those divisions. We don't accept your racism, we don't accept your anti-Roma discrimination, we don't accept your sexism, we don't accept your homophobia, we don't accept any of those divisions, and we will fight together for a better world. And we will carry on coming here at 6 o'clock and take the knee, and hopefully we will stop having new names that we can add to that list as we begin to change the world more.
Yeah.